In the shadowy halls of medieval England, a powerful spiritual guide was quietly transforming the lives of women and laypeople, challenging the rigid boundaries between the religious and the secular. This guide, Remedies Against Temptations by William Flete, a Cambridge-educated friar, was not just a scholarly treat, is but a beacon of comfort and practical wisdom in a world rife with spiritual turmoil. Many of the existing copies of Remedies were tailored for women or laypersons, suggesting that Flete's work was not confined to the Latin literate elite. Instead, it was seen as a vital resource for spiritual growth, accessible even to those just beginning their religious journey. Among the surviving manuscripts, several were found in women's communities, such as the Benedictine House of Cambrai, the Brigittine Abbey at Sion, and the Cistercian Convent at Swine. One manuscript, once housed at Barking Abbey, even made its way into the hands of Elizabeth Scrope, a noblewoman with deep connections to the abbey. This transmission from religious to lay readers underscores the text's broad appeal and its role in bridging the gap between monastic and secular spirituality. The tone of Remedies is gentle and reassuring, a stark contrast to the harsh and punitive approaches often found in religious literature of the time. Flete's opening line, "Here soweth a sourine," and a notable sentence to comfort a person that is in temptation, sets the stage for a text that is both comforting and deeply practical. He offers biblical examples and emphasizes the importance of seeking God's mercy, even after falling into temptation. Flete writes, "And if it so be that ye ha consented and fallen in any temptation, beth sorry, and crieth God mercy thereof, and beth not discomforted therefore. Thank well on the great mercy of God, how he forhieth doed his great sins, and pettier and modeline." Despite its practical approach, Remedies is often misattributed to mystics like Richard Rolle and Walter Hilton. While Flete's writing is not mystical in the traditional sense, it shares a deep interest in contemplation and self-knowledge. Flete encourages readers to recognize the internal struggle between good and evil, and to find solace in God's mercy. He writes, "The Yule will cometh of the sensualite, the which is your downward inclinage to sin, and the good cometh of grace, the which is alwe vp ward inclinage to a goodness." Flete's emphasis on the accessibility of a contemplative life to both laypeople and the religious aligns him with thinkers like Hilton, who believed that the laity could achieve deep spiritual insights. This perspective is evident in the 15th century Middle English anthology, British Library, MS Royal 18, A. X, which includes a version of Remedies tailored for a female audience. The compiler addresses the reader as a dear sister, offering remedies against spiritual temptations and gently guiding her away from fantasies to the wisdom of holy doctors. The anthology's inclusion of Remedies alongside other devotional texts, such as the Cleannesse of Sowle by Catherine of Siena, highlights the text's enduring relevance and its role in shaping English devotional culture. Flete's work draws from and contributes to a rich tradition of spiritual literature, including the Stimulus Amoris and the Ancren Vis, both of which emphasize the anchoritic model of religious life. This model, which encouraged a life of solitary contemplation, became a symbol of exemplary devotion, resonating with both lay and monastic audiences. Flete's Remedies Against Temptations is a testament to the power of practical, accessible spiritual guidance in a world where all Christians, regardless of their status, face the constant challenge of temptation. It is a text that not only comforted the troubled souls of its readers, but also helped to shape the spiritual landscape of medieval England, bridging the gap between the cloister and the world. William Flete's influence on English spirituality is deeply intertwined with the misattribution of his work to other prominent devotional writers of the time, such as Richard Rolle and Walter Hilton. This confusion persisted well into the Reformation, largely due to the publications by Wynkyn de Worde, who titled Flete's Remedies as part of Rolle's Form of Living. The Form of Living was widely read in the Middle Ages and dealt with recognizing sin and finding penance, which explains the mix-up. Wynkyn de Worde's edition begins with a paragraph from Rolle's work, and then continues with Flete's, but the entire text is credited to Rolle. This error was only corrected in the 20th century by scholars. Flete's Remedies gained significant influence, even reaching Thomas More, who drew from it in his Dialogue of Comfort Against Tribulation in 1534, and Augustine Baker, who incorporated it into his Anchor of the Spirit for English Benedictine nuns in the 17th century, still attributing it to Rolle. Flete's impact on English spirituality is not limited to the Remedies. In May 1380, he wrote 3 letters to the Augustinian friars in Cambridge, urging them to embrace a solitary and hermetical life, to avoid study and honors, and to practice charity and hospitality. He emphasized the importance of frequent confession for spiritual health. "I am writing now for the common good of England. See that it is preached throughout England that all should undergo conversion and confess frequently, for this is the will of Christ. Let it be preached or told to every religious, prelate, monk, friar, priest, and canon, that they have for each other mutual and continuous charity, so that the whole English Church may be one spirit in God. Let it reform itself. Doctor, heal yourself." Flete's concern extended beyond the monastic order to the broader church. He sent these letters to various members of the order, including the provincial, showing his deep commitment to the spiritual health of his brethren and the church. One of Flete's primary concerns was the spiritual well-being of Augustinian novices. He warned against the dangers of study, linking it to secularism and a loss of focus on meditation and God. He advised that novices should not leave the monastery for pleasure or gain, and that they should only study basic subjects like grammar and chant. He also emphasized the importance of treating novices well, providing them with necessities, and ensuring they do not possess personal items or keep them with seculars. Flete's focus on reform and the need for a healthy church reflects his deep anxiety about the future of the church and his countrymen. This concern was central to his discussions with Catherine of Siena, who shared similar views on the church's need for reform. For both Flete and Catherine, the authentic relationship with God was paramount, transcending the hierarchies and theological debates of the time. When Flete left England for a solitary life in Lexito, his ideas about temptation and its remedies remained central to his spiritual understanding. He became Catherine's spiritual advisor, and his influence is evident in her works. Both Flete and Catherine had experienced the devastating effects of the plague, which shaped their views on death, sin, and redemption. Catherine's spiritual battles, as described by Raymond of Capua, mirror the themes Flete addressed in his Remedies. She faced intense corporeal temptations, which Raymond describes as being so foul that he cannot detail them. Despite these temptations, Catherine's faith remained unshaken, and she overcame them. This struggle is a central theme in her Dialogo, where she emphasizes the importance of combating temptation and preserving faith. Flete's philosophy, as expressed in the Remedies, holds that faith is strengthened through testing and temptation. He uses secular images like forging gold and battling to illustrate this point, making his ideas accessible to a broader audience. He repeatedly reminds his readers that temptation is necessary and can be overcome, which serves as a source of hope and encouragement. Catherine's Dialogo also emphasizes the necessity of overcoming temptation, but she presents it as a more urgent and dire need. She describes the devil's assaults and the punishments awaiting sinners in hell, before explaining that temptation is a test of faith. For Catherine, overcoming temptation is a way to prove one's strength and faith in God, mirroring Flete's ideas but with a more urgent tone. Both Flete and Catherine draw on the biblical idea that faith is tested through temptation, as seen in James chapter 1, verse 2-3. "My brethren, count it all joy, when you shall fall into divers temptations, knowing that the trying of your faith worketh patience." However, their approaches differ slightly. Flete is more understanding of the personal struggle involved in overcoming temptation, while Catherine is more stringent, emphasizing that temptation can and should always be overcome. These nuanced differences reflect the unique spiritual journeys of both Flete and Catherine, yet their shared emphasis on the importance of faith and the necessity of overcoming temptation remains a central theme in their works. Both William Flete and Catherine of Siena wrote about the challenges of temptation, but they approached the subject differently. Flete categorized temptations into distinct types, such as those related to sensuality, envy, or the devil's deceptive guise of goodness. He emphasized the importance of seeking wise counsel to overcome these temptations. Catherine, on the other hand, believed that faith could help individuals recognize and combat their own sins. She encouraged a more personal and direct approach to fighting temptation, often through faith and confession. Flete and Catherine used similar language to describe the devil's tactics, which resonated with their late medieval English audience. For example, both referred to the devil's ability to appear in various colors, or under the color of goodness. This shared vocabulary helped their texts feel more connected and accessible to readers. Despite their different approaches, both authors emphasized the importance of vigilance against temptation and the need for spiritual guidance. Flete's advice often centered on the idea that sinners need help to see their own faults. He suggested that individuals should avoid being alone, seek counsel from a wise person, and trust in God. He believed that no sin was too great to be forgiven if the sinner was truly repentant and sought God's mercy. This gentle and reassuring message likely contributed to the widespread popularity and copying of Flete's works. Catherine, however, placed more responsibility on the individual to recognize and combat their own sins. She believed that faith and reason could help a person see the venom of sin and cast it away. For her, confession was a means of cleansing and absolution, not just advice. While Flete's approach was more communal and supportive, Catherine's was more individual and rigorous. Despite their falling out later in life, Flete and Catherine had a significant impact on each other's work. Flete, who had once been Catherine's advisor, later wrote a sermon praising her virtues and urging others to follow her teachings. He recognized the power of her written words and believed they would influence many generations to come. Flete's role in the circulation of Catherine's texts, such as the Cleannesse of Sowle, further demonstrates their interconnected legacy. The Cleannesse of Sowle is a short excerpt from Catherine's works that circulated widely in medieval England. Unlike longer texts, this excerpt was often included in miscellanies alongside other devotional materials. These collections provide insight into the diverse ways Catherine's teachings were adapted and used by English readers. The context in which the Cleannesse appeared, the texts it was paired with, and the manner in which it was excerpted reveal how Catherine's ideas were integrated into the broader devotional culture of the time. Catherine of Siena's The Cleannesse of Sowle is a text that emerged from her visit to the friary of Lexido, where she met William Flete, an English Augustinian friar. This visit took place in early 1377, shortly after Pope Gregory XI decided to move the papacy back to Rome. During this time, Catherine dictated a summary of her theological beliefs to Flete and other priests. This summary, known as the Documento Spirituale, is one of the earliest codifications of Catherine's spiritual teachings and predates her more famous works, such as the Dialogo and her letters. The Documento Spirituale was initially circulated primarily in England, likely through Flete, who sent it to his friary in his home country. The text's circulation in England is significant because it represents the most robust presence of the document outside of Italy. The Latin version of the text has a postscript by Thomas Caffarini, a key figure in Catherine's canonization, which suggests that the text was intended to be widely disseminated within the Dominican order. In England, the Documento Spirituale became known as the Cleannesse of Sowle. It was translated into Middle English and found its way into several manuscripts. One of these manuscripts, British Library, Harley 2409, contains the most complete version of the text. The text is also found in various other manuscripts, often as a short paragraph, and is sometimes misattributed to other authors, such as Stephen Macconi. The content of the Cleannesse is a divine message to a woman, referred to as my daughter, on how to achieve spiritual cleanness. The message is structured around 3 points. The reader must be united with God, and always keep God in mind. The reader must completely deny their own will and submit entirely to God's will, understanding that everything that happens is for their good. The reader must judge the actions of others according to God's law, not their own feelings, and respect the diverse paths of God's servants. Following these points will lead to self-regulation, a strong relationship with God, and harmonious interactions with others. The text emphasizes the importance of purity and virtue, which are achieved through the annihilation of self and a deep union with God. The spread of the Cleannesse in England is intriguing because it often appears in devotional miscellanies, which are collections of various texts. These miscellanies could be expensive and lavish, owned by aristocrats, or simple and practical, used by preachers. The text's presence in such diverse collections suggests that it was adaptable to a wide range of readers. For example, It appears alongside other devotional texts like the Meditations Vita Christi, the Poor Caitiff, and the mystical writings of Bridget of Sweden. It also often appears with works by William Flete, indicating a common Augustinian context. The anonymity of the text in many manuscripts where it is attributed to a Sowle soul, rather than Catherine further suggests that its content was more important than its author. This anonymity allowed the text to be more widely accepted and used, as it avoided the political and religious associations that Catherine's name might have brought. The context in which the Cleannesse appears in these miscellanies is crucial to understanding its reception. Medieval miscellanies were not just random collections of texts, but were often compiled with specific themes in mind. The presence of the Cleannesse, alongside other spiritual and devotional texts, indicates that it was valued for its spiritual guidance and was likely used for pastoral care, especially for women seeking to live a virtuous life. The varied contexts in which the Cleannesse is found, ranging from monastic houses to aristocratic families, show the wide reach of Catherine's teachings in late medieval England. The text's adaptability and the diverse readership it attracted highlight its significance in the spiritual landscape of the time. The Cleannesse of Sowle is a small but profound text that has found its way into various manuscripts, each offering a unique context that influences how it is read and understood. To truly grasp its meaning, we must consider not just the text itself, but the company it keeps within these manuscripts. In the Bodleian Library, MS Bodley 131, the Cleannesse is nestled among other devotional texts, including Nicholas Love's The Mirror of the Blessed Life of Jesus Christ, and William Flete's Remedies Against Temptation. This manuscript, scribed by John Morton, a wealthy bibliophile, suggests a personal and deeply devotional use. The Mirror, a well-regarded and orthodox text, sets a tone of piety and orthodoxy. The Cleannesse follows, stripped of its mystical overtones, and instead becomes a practical guide to achieving a clean soul. The text's placement among these other works suggests a reader who is meditating on the life of Christ, reflecting on personal temptation, and seeking purity of soul through devotion. In contrast, British Library, MS Royal 18AX, is a manuscript compiled for a female audience, focusing on themes of sin and temptation. Here, the Cleannesse is unattributed to Catherine and is followed by Flete's Remedies Against Temptation, which addresses a nun struggling with temptation. The manuscript's content, including a translation of the Psalm Leroy and a confession formula for women, indicates a highly literate and spiritually engaged female audience. In this context, the Cleannesse is a remedy for impure living, emphasizing the practical aspects of achieving spiritual purity. MS Arundel 197, owned by Henry Howard, the Duke of Norfolk, presents the Cleannesse in a more fluid and evolving form. The text is part of a collection that has been extensively revised, with additions and corrections, suggesting a living and changing document. The reader here sees the Cleannesse as part of a broader devotional practice, one that is actively engaged and continually refined. The text's direct address to the reader and its integration with other devotional pieces highlight its role in personal and monastic contemplation. Cambridge Trinity College MS 336, with its potential Lollard connections, offers a different perspective. The manuscript's main text, Poor Caitiff, has been linked to Wycliffite revisions, and the addition of the Cleannesse at the end of the codex challenges a strictly orthodox reading. Whether the manuscript was owned by a Lollard or a layperson with Lollard sympathies, the Cleannesse serves as a reminder of complete faith and submission to God, aligning with the broader themes of the manuscript. Bodleian Library, MS Rawlinson C. 285, and Cambridge University Library, MSFF. 5.40, contain a unique version of the Cleannesse, known as version B. This version is shorter and more condensed, yet it retains the core message of self-annihilation and dependence on God's will. These manuscripts also include works by Walter Hilton and Richard Rolle, further emphasizing the mystical and contemplative nature of the texts. The Cleannesse, in these versions, is imbued with a visionary quality, drawing the reader into a deeper spiritual experience. Finally, the version of the Cleannesse, found in the Orchard of Sion, a translation of Catherine's Dialogo, provides a clear parallel to the original Latin text. The text's placement in a section about achieving perfect purity of soul underscores its importance. The similarities between this passage and the Cleannesse highlight the text's origins and its relevance to the broader mystical tradition. In each of these manuscripts, the Cleannesse of Sowle takes on a different shade, reflecting the varied contexts and purposes of its compilation. Whether as a practical guide, a spiritual remedy, a living text, or a mystical vision, the Cleannesse remains a powerful and versatile text, inviting readers to seek purity of soul through devotion and faith.